Hey Kipsters, so as you can see, this video is going over the mock assessment 3, which is day 3 of the test you took before break. Please make sure to have this test out as you go along. And as you can see on the bottom right, I chose the questions that the most Kipsters got wrong, and that's numbers 1, 7, 10, 11, 15, 17, 22, and 26 part B. I know it's a lot of questions, but if you got a question wrong that's not one of these, you can just give me a call or come find me during school and we can go over them as well, okay? But these are the most popular ones that Kipsters got wrong, so I wanted to go over these online so you can work these out on your own. Okay, so let's start with question number 1. All right, here it is. It says Tracy exercises by walking and running laps around a track. For every 2 laps she walks, she runs 3 laps. Which statement is correct? And now I see 4 different statements, and it looks like they switch up things a little. So one says, for every lap Tracy walks, she runs 3/5 of a lap. For every lap Tracy walks, she runs 3/2 of a laps. For every lap Tracy runs, she walks 3/2 laps. So they're switching around runs and walks. And obviously, the whole question is centered around this ratio. For every 2 laps she walks, she runs 3 laps. And because these answer choices have walks and runs in different orders, it makes me think of the fact that every ratio, we did this a long time ago, has 2 possible unit rates. So what I'm going to draw, and you can see it on the bottom here, for every 2 laps she walks, she runs 3 laps. Okay, but I did it twice, and here's why. Because in one of these ratio tables, I'm going to put the unit rate of 1 here, and the other one, well, why don't you point? Where do you think I'm going to put it? Go ahead, point. Yeah, I'm going to put it up there. And I'm going to solve for both, and I'm going to show you why in a second. So let's start here. You highlight the column that you know, and then you draw an arrow from the column that you know to the part in the other column that you also know. So how do you get from 3 to 1? Go ahead, call it out. Yeah, if you said divide by 3, you were right. Whatever you do to the bottom, you do to the top. So what is 2 divided by 3? Go ahead, call it out if you know it. Yeah, if you just said this, you're right. That means the same thing as 2 divided by 3. So 2 divided by 3 is 2/3. Now let's go over here. Oh, wait, before we go over there, let's talk about what this means. Okay, 1 lap she runs, she walks 2/3 of a lap. So I'm going to write that down here. Look, for every lap she runs, she walks 2/3 laps. For every lap she runs, she walks 2/3 laps. So I'm looking here. For every lap she runs, she walks 3/2 laps. No. For every lap Tracy runs, she walks 2/5 laps. No. C and D aren't right. Hopefully we'll figure out if A or B are right. All right, let's go over to the second ratio table. Highlight what you know. Draw the arrow. How do you get from 2 to 1? Go ahead, call it out. And whatever you do to the top, you do to the 3 divided by 2. 3, same idea as before. 3 divided by 2. Now you could have made this 1.5, but I noticed in the problem that they left improper fractions as they were. So now what does this one mean? Well, this means for every lap she walks, she runs 3/2 laps. So I wrote that down here. For every lap she walks, she runs 3/2 laps, and that is choice B. Okay? Pretty difficult problem. You have to try both unit rates and find the one that makes sense. Okay, so make sure you have that down because you know I'm going to start asking homework and do now questions that are like this. Okay, that was number 1. Moving on to number 7. The swimming club is conducting a vote to choose a mascot. There are 164 club members who want a dolphin for their mascot. These members represent 82% of the total number of club members. How many club members are there? All right, I'm looking at those answer choices. I'm going to ignore them right now because all I really want to do is focus on the problem. And there's a lot of key information in there, and I always like to circle it. You have the 164 club members. and these members represent 82%. Now, every time I see a percent, I'm drawing myself one of these, also known as a double number line. And every time I draw one of those, I'm going to label, let's see if you remember, over here. Go ahead and call it out. Every double number line we label with what there. Go ahead. Yeah, if you said percent, you'd be correct. Over here is going to be 0%. And somewhere over here, I'm going to put what percent? Call it out. 100%, right? That's our total. Now in the problem, I notice 82%. Can you point about where on this number line 82% would be? Is it over here, over there? Go ahead, point. If I put it like right about there, it's not perfect, but that looks about right. Okay, so I got my whole percent line done. Now down here, what is this problem about? So in addition to the percents, what information do you think would go down here? It seems like it's talking about these club members. So there's a club at school, the swimming club, and I think that's what I would call the bottom part of the number line. Okay, the big question is, after you put your 0 there for no club members, you always draw your 2 lines here and here. And what needs to happen now is you need to figure out, based on the question, whether 164 is going to go down here or over there, and that's the trickiest part of this problem, okay? 164 members who want a dolphin for their mascot. These members represent 82%. So the 164 represents the 82%. So point where you think 164 is going to go. If you pointed there, you were right. 164 people want the dolphin as a mascot. And the question says, how many club members are there? And that's why we're putting any letter you want there. All right. So now that we got that straight, now it's time to try and solve for K. And it's just like a ratio table. I always like to highlight the column that I know, and it's this one. And I try to figure out a way to get from the column that I know to the other information that I know in the other column. Going from 82 to 100%, yo, that's scary. Scary like this dude, Great Khali. I don't want to do it. I mean, that's a lot of work. And if I can find another way. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're probably thinking, maybe I'll go back to the 1. And a lot of you did that on your test, but you didn't have to. First, try highlighting the row that you know and seeing if you can get from the row that you know to the information you know in the other row. And you can get from 82 to 164, and I would bet many of you could figure that out in your head. How many times does 82 go into 164? Go ahead, call it out if you know it. Yeah, if you said times 2, you were absolutely right. And whatever you do to the left, you do to the right. 100 times 2 is what? Go ahead, call it out. It's 200. That's your answer right there. Okay, and I know a lot of you went back to the 1 and did all this crazy math, but sometimes you have to remember that first try the column like we did, but that ended up with Great Khali, then try the row. If neither of those are working for you, then go back to the 1. But this was the easiest way to do problem number 7. All right, next problem coming up. Problem number 10. A community choir has a 3-to-1 ratio of women to men. Which statement best describes what the ratio means? We need all these answer choices, so we're not going to block anything, and we're going to highlight the key information, which is obviously that. Now, when I saw that information, I actually had a picture in my head that kind of looked like this. All right, there you go. You see, you got your 3 women and your 1 man right there. There's the dude. I don't know why he looks like that, okay? And now I just went through each answer choice and see if it made sense. So the first answer choice is there are 4 more women than men. Now I look at that picture, there aren't 4 more women than men. How many more women are there than men? Go ahead, call it out. Yeah, look, there's 3 women, 1 man. So that means there's 2 more women than men. Letter A is wrong. There are 4 times as many women as men. No, there's not 4 times as many women as men. There's actually 3 times, which is why I think letter C is the correct answer. There are 3 times as many women as men, because there's 3, and 1 times 3 makes 3. But let's just look at letter D to make sure there are 3 more women than men. No, we talked about that. There's 2 more women than men, which is why letter D is incorrect, and C is the right answer. For problems like these, just draw out something and just think about what makes sense. Okay, question number 10, done. Number 11. Now this one was probably the most trickiest question on all the tests. Maybe number 26B as well. But here's number 11. Ms. Stinson makes a music playlist that contains 8 songs and is 25 minutes long. This information is shown in the table below. Ms. Stinson runs the playlist during a 2.5-hour event. How many times does the playlist play during the event? All right, first thing, I'm getting rid of that because it just is going to distract me. I'm going to try and solve it without even looking at them. Here's the question. How many times does the playlist play during the event? Now, I know some people solve this problem differently, but I want you to notice something. I'm only circling this information here because it doesn't say how many songs played during the 2.5 hours. It said, how many times did the playlist play? Okay, and if you play the playlist 1 time, how many minutes is that going to be? Go ahead, call it out. Let me say it again. If you play the playlist 1 time, how many minutes long is it? Yeah, it's 25 minutes long. It's 8 songs, but the question didn't ask about songs. It said how many times are you going to play the playlist? And if you play it once, that's 25 minutes. Okay? Now, the second thing I noticed is that I have minutes, and then I have hours. And the first thing you needed to do, and you can't use your reference table for it because it doesn't help you, you need to know how to convert between minutes and hours. So that's the first thing I wrote. I made a ratio table, and I need to know how many minutes are in an hour. So go ahead and call that out. Yeah, if you said 1 hour was 60 minutes, you'd be right. Now, the event was 2.5 hours long, so point to where I'm going to put my 2.5. Go ahead, point to it. If you pointed there, you'd be right. And now I do the same thing that I always do. I highlight what I know. I draw my arrow 1 to 2.5. How do I get from 1 to 2.5? Go ahead and call it out. Yeah, it's just times 2.5, and whatever you do to the top, you do to the bottom is right. So 60 times 2.5. I just did it like that. You do not need to line up the decimals when you're multiplying. Okay? So I'm going to give you all, and actually, I don't mind if you pause the tape and solve what 60 times 2.5 is. Okay? Go ahead and pause the tape and try and solve it. Pause it now. All right, if you're back, here's what the first column would look like. I'm sorry, the first row, if you did 5 times 0 and 5 times 6, that would give you 300. And then the next row, you just got to remember to add that 0. Then 2 times 0 is 0. 2 times 6 is 12. Add that all up, you get 1,500. But don't forget, when you're multiplying decimals, you have to count the number of places to the right of the decimal point. So for this one, in parentheses, what would you put in parentheses over here? Go ahead and call it out. Zeros, right? And what about for the 2.5? 1 is correct because you have 1 place behind the decimal point, which means down here you have 1, which means we slide, slippity slide. Time for the decimal to take a ride 1 time like that. So the answer for how many minutes are in 2.5 hours or 2.5 hours? 150 minutes. All right, that's step 1. That's a big important step because now we can figure out how many times the playlist needed to be played. So here's the deal. Times the playlist is played over how many minutes. So we just talked about that if you play the playlist 1 time, how many minutes long is that? Yeah, it's 25 minutes long if you play it once. We want to find out how many times you need to play it for 150 minutes. So I put my 150 there, I highlight, and then I draw my arrow. And you have to ask yourself, how many times does 25 go into 150? And you can actually roll it. It's like quarters, okay? So if you roll it, it goes 25, 50, 75, 100, 125, 150. And if you roll that on your fingers, that's exactly 6 times. Whatever you do to the bottom, you do to the top. 1 times 6 gives you 6. So the answer was, if you played the playlist 6 times, that would be 2.5 hours. Okay, super tricky question, but I think if you spent your time and thought about it, this is one way to do it. I know some other kipsters found some other creative ways as well. Okay, nice job. Let's move on to another question. Number 15. Oh man, this one was tricky too. Okay, it says 3 cell phone towers are shown on the grid below. Each unit on the grid represents 10 miles. A 4th tower will be built 80 miles from Tower 3. Which coordinate describes the location of the 4th tower? All right. Each unit on the grid represents 10 miles. And a 4th tower will be built 80 miles. So if each unit represents 10 miles, how many units represent 80 miles? Go ahead and call it out. Yeah, it's 8 units. So we're looking for something that is 8 units away from Tower 3. Now you look at answer choice A, and you need all these answer choices because one of them is right and the other ones are wrong. Answer choice A is wrong because answer choice A, if you go 7, 9, that's where Tower 3 is. The question's saying they're building a 4th tower 80 miles or 8 units away from Tower 3. Letter A is where Tower 3 is. That can't be right. So let's try letter B. Let's plot where 10, 3 is. Can you point on the grid where 10, 3 would be? Go ahead, point to it. Did you point there? You'd be right. So now we just need to count how many units away is this point from this point. And you can count along with me as I draw it on the screen. Sorry, that doesn't look perfect, but you get the idea. We need 8 units. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 units away. Sorry, that one's not right. Okay? And now I hope you get the idea. Let's look at letter C. Point to where 8, 8 would be on this coordinate grid. Go ahead, point to it. Did you point there? Y'all, how many units away is Tower 3 from this point? Yeah, it's 1, 2. There's no way that's the answer. So I'm almost 100% sure that 7, 1, which is right there, is the correct answer. But I'm going to check just to make sure it's 8 units away. So let's count it up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 units away. Letter D is the answer. Okay, if you stopped and tried to really think what the question was asking, this wasn't a terribly difficult one, but you needed to really understand what the question was asking. Okay, number 15 done. Nice job. Number 17. All right, Miriam labeled point S shown on the coordinate grid. All right, this part you got to read it carefully and make sure you understand. So it says, in relation to point S, point R is located 3 units further from the origin in the direction of the x-axis and 4 units closer to the origin along the y-axis. What are the coordinates of point R? All right. I don't want to look at the answer choices. I just want to focus on what the question is saying. Now I see point R is located 3 units further from the origin. So can you point on this coordinate grid where the origin is located? Did you point there? You'd be right. That's where the origin is. Okay, it's the point 0, 0. 3 units further from the origin in the direction of the x-axis. Okay, so here's the x-axis. X-axis goes from left to correct, so left to right, and you are moving 3 units in the direction of the x-axis away from the origin. So you are going like this: 1, 2, 3 points away, because you're going left to right, but you're going right because you're moving away from the origin. All right, next part. 4 units closer to the origin along the y-axis. So everyone, show me with your fingers, where's the y-axis going? Yeah, the y-axis is right here, and it goes top to bottom, okay, vertically. But now I'm moving 4 units closer. So Am I going up 4 or down 4? Go ahead and call it out. Yeah, if you said down 4, you'd be right because you're moving closer to the origin. So we move 1, 2, 3, 4, and end up at that point there. What are the coordinates of that new point, which is point R? Go ahead, call it out if you know it. Yeah, it would be 6, 0, because you run 6 and you don't jump at all, okay? Or you go to 6 on the x-axis and you don't go anywhere on the y-axis. So the answer to that one was letter C. All right, almost done. Number 22, 2 more questions to go. Jacob planted a 5-foot tree. After 1 year, he measured it and found that the tree had grown by 20% of its original height. How tall was the tree after 1 year? You know I'm getting rid of the answer choices. You know I'm circling that key information. He's got a 5-foot tree, and it grows by 20% of its original height. And we want to know, in 1 year, it grew 20%. So how tall is it after 1 year? All right, so clearly the answer's got to be bigger than 5 feet because it grew. Okay, and every time I see a percent, I'm drawing one of these. And I hate to sound like a broken record, but can you tell me what goes here on our double number line? If you said percent, you were right. You got to throw your 0 and your 100% there. I see 20%. So now I'm going to look at my number line. Can you point approximately where you think 20% should go on this double number line? Go ahead, point. If you pointed there, that's about right. It's not perfect, but it's about right. And I put in here, just to be clear, that this is how much it grew. Okay? And what is it? Well, the it is the height of the tree. Okay, so the question becomes the same one as that other question. I think it was question number 7. You have your 0 there as always. And then you have to figure out whether the 5 goes underneath the 20% or was it its total height. And the answer is, for the height of the tree, it was 5 feet tall. That's how much it is. And we need to figure out how much it grew by. Okay? Now, same idea as before. Just like in a ratio table, we're going to highlight the column that we know, and we're going to draw an arrow. And now we got to ask ourselves, can we do this in our head? Can we go from 100 to 20 in our head? So I know the number is getting smaller. And since they're both whole numbers, from 100 to 20, I am going to divide by something. What do you think you need to divide 100 by to get to 20? And I'll give you a hint. If you roll your 20s, you might be able to figure it out. Go ahead, roll your 20s. All right, call it out. What would you have to divide by? Go ahead. Did you say 5? If you said 5, you were right. 100 divided by 5 gives you 20, which means whatever you do to the top, you do to the bottom. 5 divided by 5, well, that gives you 1. And since the units were feet, it's 1 feet. Now let's be clear. 1 feet is how much the tree grew, because we wrote in here, it grew by 20%. It grew by 1 feet or 1 foot, okay? Sorry, I probably should have put foot in there. So if something's 5 feet tall and it grows by 1 foot, you add that up. How tall is it now? 6 feet, okay? So how tall was the tree after 1 year? Your answer's right there. It was 6 feet tall, okay? A bit tricky because it had the extra step at the end, but again, this is a problem you're going to need to know how to do. And then finally, the most gotten wrong question, 26, part B. All right, here we go. Mike's Sports also sells the same ski socks. Each pair of socks at Mike's costs $7.75. However, Mike's Sports offers $5 off the total price for every 3 pairs of socks purchased. For a purchase of 15 pairs of socks, what is the unit cost per pair? Explain how to find the unit cost. Use words and/or numbers in your explanation. All right. Key information. Each pair of socks at Mike's costs $7.75. He offers $5 only after you buy 3 pairs. And then for a purchase of 15 pairs, what is the unit cost? All right, first thing I need to do is I have to figure out how much 3 pairs of socks cost. And that's not hard, okay? Because it told you in the problem that if you have pairs of socks and money, each pair of socks costs $7.75. Okay, that's not difficult. And I want to first do 3 pairs of socks. And I'll tell you why in a second if you don't know. But do the 3, and then this is not difficult here either. You just highlight what you know, draw your arrow. How do you get from 1 to 3? Go ahead, call it out. Whatever you do to the top, you do to the $7.75 times 3. You could pause it for a second to do that problem. So go ahead and pause. All right, now once you're back, you should have gotten $23.25. Okay? So if you bought 3 pairs of socks at Mike's, it would cost you $23.25, but he offers $5 off for every 3 pairs of socks. So here's the thing. You have to take this and subtract $5 from it. So it really costs you, for 3 pairs of socks, it really costs you $18.25. Okay? That's first most important thing. Now, the thing that was annoying about this question was that you actually didn't need this information here for a purchase of 15 pairs of socks. You didn't need it because you just need to find out what is the unit cost per pair. So watch. All you need to do is if you know 3 socks cost $18.25, you just need to know how much 1 pair of socks costs. Okay? And I know that was very confusing, but that's all you needed to know. They wanted to know the unit cost per pair. You highlight, you draw your arrow, and that's divide by 3. And whatever you do to the top, you do to the bottom. Now this division problem, also what made this problem really tricky, was that if you do this division problem, and I do want you to pause, and if you pause, after you pause, you're going to notice that this division problem does give you a remainder. So make your remainder into a fraction if you could, okay? So pause the tape now and solve this division problem. Go ahead. All right, if you're back, the answer you should have gotten would have been 6.08 and 1/3, or 6.083333 till infinity. And that's why the answer to this question, the unit cost, is about $6.08. Again, I wasn't a big fan of this question, but it was still something I feel like you guys could have been able to do, and I wanted to review it online for you. Okay, so those are the hardest questions on day 3. Thank you all for hanging in there and showing so much grit. Talk to you soon.